Hi, welcome back to Broken and Brilliant. I'm Carrie O'Toole with Carrie O'Toole Ministries. Today I am joined by my people. So I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves and then we'll talk about how we all know each other and what this is all about. So why don't we start here?
I'm Kathleen Johnson and I am part of RAD Advocates.
I'm Amy Vantine and I am part of RAD Advocates.
And I'm Beth Cochran and I'm part of RAD Advocates.
And I am not part of RAD Advocates, but RAD Advocates is an advocacy group for parents of kids with RAD, which many people don't know what that is. So that's Reactive Attachment Disorder. Why don't one of you share a little bit about what that is?
Sure, I can do that. So Reactive Attachment Disorder is a brain disorder that develops when a child is exposed to trauma of all sorts, neglect, abuse, abandonment, by the time they're age 3. And so during that critical development period for their brains, it gets hardwired disordered.
Correct. And so let's talk about what that looks like in our families, because we've all been impacted by this disorder. And it may look a little bit different with each one of us. So maybe why don't we just go down the line. We'll start with you, Beth. Share a little bit about what that looked like in your home.
Well, for us, it looked different at different stages. Our daughter came to us at 6 months old. And so with each stage, there was always kind of a swing from one end to the other. So she would go from appearing to possibly be attaching to swinging to the opposite end of completely detached. As an infant, she was not attached to anything at all. And then by the time she was 2 or 3, we started seeing the swing to a little bit of attachment. And then something would happen. We often didn't know what, and then it would swing to the other end, and that was kind of the trajectory we were on for many years.
And what did it look like as a baby when she wasn't attached? What did that look like?
Very little eye contact when you were close, although if you were probably as far as you and I or farther away, she would watch you like a hawk. Every move you made, she was watching you, and it was eerie. It was like someone watching you from behind all the time. She would smile if you were afar, but if you got too close, she would go very stoic, and her whole face would turn. We called it plastic. It would flatten, and she would go blank, and she would turn the other way and look down. She didn't hold you back. When you held her, she was floppy. Didn't want to be held close to your body.
Right.
If we would turn her the other way, she would kind of sling over our arm.
Right. Did anybody else have anything like that at the younger stages?
My daughter came to us when she was 7, so I didn't have that experience.
Very different.
Yeah,
so what did it look like as she started getting older or came in at 7?
At 7, we I think part of our first red flag was that immediately she started calling us mom and dad within 24 to 48 hours.
Now, why is that weird? Because a lot of people would think, isn't that great?
Well, hindsight, I now know that was a red flag. In the moment, we really thought we're wonderful people and our calling to help children is really, I know we all laugh now, our calling to help children, this is it and look what we're doing. But I did remember feeling that it was a little bit weird because she had just been removed from her biological mother. And I remember having the thought of the trauma that she had just experienced, of what the incident was that actually brought her into our care, that it was kind of odd that a child would immediately be connecting to 2 strangers that she had never met before and calling us mom and dad.
Yeah.
And the behaviors that we experienced were definitely in our home, and people on the outside did not see it.
Yes, and would we all agree with that?
Nobody on the outside.
That's a huge part of this disorder. So what might we see in the home, and what might they look like outside the home?
Yes.
Anybody want to?
She was very defiant. My child was very defiant. Could not receive any parenting commands. Struggled with just simple tasks everything was a struggle, a fight or flight, constantly very aggressive, screaming, yelling, holes in the wall. She just really had a hard time regulating in our home.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for just a second, because you mentioned fight or flight, you also mentioned regulating, and so these kids come in with a lot of trauma, which was not their doing. So none of us blame these kids.
No,
we don't see them as evil children or, you know, just bad kids or anything like that. They've been traumatized. They have been terrorized. It has been crazy for them. Whatever they went through, whether it was an orphanage, whether it was foster care, whether it was abuse, neglect, all these different things. So their brains, like you said, have been wired around fight or flight, which is PTSD.
Yes.
And we see this in veterans, and we understand that. It's hard to kind of understand this in children, and it plays out a little bit different in kids. So they have fight or flight going all the time. And what parents of kids with reactive attachment disorder know is that typically mom is the one who triggers mostly the fight or flight. We're the traumatizing agent in their life. So what's that look like?
Rejection. Absolute rejection from the moment that it starts.
Right.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I mean, we adopted internationally.
Us too.
And our daughter, and our daughter came at the age of 8. So we actually virtually twinned our youngest biological daughter and the daughter that we adopted.
So same age.
Same age.
Yeah.
3 months different. So the rejection specifically towards me, I think for me and then our youngest biological daughter, the behaviors were the most intense.
Right.
So it was, I don't care about you. I don't care if we ever have a relationship. I hate you. And I don't care.
From day one?
No. We had about 2 weeks where we joked, the little Mary Poppins line, practically perfect in every way. Yes, that was our little buzzword. And then the 2 weeks ended, and it was put your seatbelt on and hang on for dear life. What the heck just happened? So by 6 months, for the first time in my entire life, I was in therapy. Sitting in a therapist's office, and I said to her, I can do hard, but I cannot do hopeless. And you're going to have to show me where there's some hope, because waking up in the morning was one of the hardest things to make myself get out of bed and start the day again. I was having panic attacks, and
so now you're having fight or flight.
Yes.
Which is very, very common for parents of RAD. So here we are, people who are somewhat normal, you know, relatively speaking, whatever that looks like. We're functioning. We're making it. We're making it through life. You know, we can handle hard, and all of a sudden, every one of us is in seeing counselors, psychiatrists, trying to find out what's going on in my brain, because I'm now having fight or flight. I'm now having anxiety, panic attacks, depression, sleeplessness, all kinds of crazy. And we're like, what happened? And welcome to the world of parenting kids with reactive attachment disorder. And what we've all found is that there's not a whole lot of help for the kids, first of all. And that is so disheartening. Like you said, I can handle hard, but when there's nothing. So I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about there's stuff happening to us, and we're seeking all this help for the kids. And first of all, there's no help for the kids. And then what about us? And so it gets flipped on us, and all of a sudden, you are an angry person, you are depressed, you don't parent well, you don't know what you're doing, and here
you're the problem.
You're the problem. Talk about that a little bit, shall we?
Oh boy. I think for me, having a little one from the beginning and talking all along through the open case through foster care about my concerns for the lack of attachment, my concerns for what we knew she witnessed, and obviously there's more when you know this much. What we knew about the prenatal alcohol and drug exposure, and the prenatal and postnatal domestic abuse between mom and dad. We knew this much, so that means there's this much more. And so, you know, I kept bringing that back up with the lack of attachment to anything. Didn't even really trust what was in her bottle, didn't know her name at 6 months, could barely, her whole development, her core was not there because she laid in a car seat or something similar. Her head was square and flat. Right. So I kept bringing all of that up. You know, what about all of these little things? And it started getting flipped back on me. So for me, from the time she was 9-ish months to a year, it kind of, my knowledge kept getting kind of turned back on me that I was reading into it too much.
Right.
And I knew I wasn't.
Right.
Because everything we'd been trying and everything I was reading about and everything I knew from my education and my background wasn't working.
Well, and I think that this is something that we've all felt.
Yes.
We've gone to the specialists,
Yes.
and what we start finding out is we know more than they do.
Absolutely.
And it's terrifying.
Yes. Well, and I think that piece comes from, you know, as mothers, our natural instinct is to care and to provide and to nurture. And whether it's researching developmental trauma, reactive attachment disorder, or it's researching getting tubes put in your child's ears, we're going to research. We're going to make sure that our children are taken care of to the best of our ability and the best that we know how. So I think as mothers, when we, and also entering into this as adoptive parents, we understand there's going to be trauma.
Yes.
That wasn't...
We were trained.
We were trained to know there's going to be
Yes.
trauma. And so the other piece of it is we're also researching the trauma that they've gone through and how do we help them work through it.
And sometimes we don't know what the trauma is.
Right.
We just know there was trauma.
Right.
And so we are researching.
Well, and we don't know whether it's this developmental trauma, so PTSD kind of things. We don't know whether it's attachment things. We don't know whether they have other diagnoses, fetal alcohol. We don't know whether they have developmental disabilities.
Yeah, and I think the scariest piece for me, and I think it's safe to assume for everyone, when you go to professionals, you expect that they know, and so you follow what they say.
Yes.
And you know, in our experience, when we first started going, I mean, my background is in the medical field. My family has, you know, doctors and nurses, and so I expect that the professional I'm going to knows what they're doing, and knowing that I have not done anything bad to my child. And so to all of a sudden realize that I've gone from a educated person who is doing well,
Proactively
and
seeking for your child.
and realizing that suddenly the look I'm getting from professionals has changed from, wow, you're a great advocate, great mother, to what are you doing? This is all you. I don't think your child is safe at your home. Right. It was the most
humiliating.
Well, it was unsettling. It was terrifying because I'm realizing you as a professional don't understand what's happening.
Exactly.
And now you're trying to figure out how to come after me.
Yeah.
And
Amy,
I
state that
let you
again. State that again.
I said it's a complete loneliness.
Yes.
It takes you from that feeling of where you were already feeling scared, and I'm needing to reach out to people to help come along and create safety for my child and for my family, and to help work through this. But then now when the professionals don't even understand, it's a very scary place. You know, I've always said, you know, we all believe that if you're in crisis, you can call 911. We're taught that as a very, as young children, call 911. Well, for RAD families, we can call 911, and even the first responders don't know how to respond.
They've never seen this.
They've
They don't
never
know
seen
what
it,
it
and
is.
they don't know how to help the family
Right.
in crisis.
Well, and I remember back in like the 70s, because I'm old, there were bumper stickers that said "Believe the children." Do you remember
Yes,
that?
Right.
Absolutely.
And I was like,
Absolutely.
that was when child abuse was kind of coming to the
Yes.
forefront, and it's like
Yeah.
if a child says they're being abused, believe them.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
And that is still the philosophy.
It is.
Right.
Still is.
And,
So you want
and
to talk about
for the majority
allegations.
of
Absolutely.
people, that is very true. But
Absolutely.
what a lot of people do not understand is what happens to a child whose brain has been impacted by
Yes.
trauma, and they are in fight or flight all the time. They are in survival mode, and what that means is they need to control their world. And so what they will sometimes do, and many times do, is they will have false accusations.
Oh yes, they do.
And
Yeah.
that didn't happen to me, but
It
I
did
know
to
it
me.
happened to some of you. And I know people who have been put in prison
Yes.
because
Yes.
their child accused them of something
Yes.
that did not happen.
Right.
Right.
And it's very terrifying. I wanted to speak real quick also about the idea of professionals not understanding. So when we were going through this, a friend of mine who's a counselor, and actually wasn't mine at the time, but she told me about an event going on down in Colorado Springs that was for counselors, and it was a training on reactive attachment disorder. I went, there were 60 therapists there, and I was so thankful that they were getting this training. I was the only one at the time without a degree. I have one now, but I didn't have it at the time. And what I recognized was none of them know anything. And they were all looking at me, and I was kind of the guinea pig for the day, and they were all like, does it really happen like this? Does this really happen? And I was like, oh my gosh, you're the therapist, and I know more than you.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I went back to grad school, because I thought, I've got to figure this out, I'm in my master's program in counseling. I have a degree in human services specializing in marriage and family therapy, and I went to 2 different universities. And I remember saying, where are the classes on trauma? Where are the classes on attachment? And one person said to me, you might be able to get something at the PhD level. Well, let me tell you, every therapist out there, unless you're seeing somebody who has a PhD, which even then you might be able to get something at the PhD level, therapists have heard of attachment. We understand it a little bit. They want to help.
They do.
They truly do.
They really do.
And I've got a 2nd level attachment-based intervention specialist certification. And I've taken, I think, 32 hours in that. And RAD was covered for about 20 minutes. And even there, it was covered as if it's some rare thing.
That you'll never see.
And really, the parents were kind of blamed. And I had to, first of all, let my PTSD calm down, because I know that if I speak when I'm triggered, I'm going to look like a crazy woman. So I just sat quietly and prayed and got it calmed down, and finally was able to raise my hand and say, this is not accurate.
Right.
These are my clients
Good for you.
you're speaking about.
Mm-hmm.
So you all came together because there are no resources for
Right.
parents. Who wants to speak about that? Maybe Amy, you want to share about that a little bit?
Sure. We all met through social media, one way or another. I had met Beth first and found out that we lived in the same community. And so when you hear that somebody else is going through what you're going through, and now, mind you, the people that connected us don't know RAD, but they kept telling me, I know somebody else that's saying something very similar.
You're both crazy, let's connect
Let's
you.
connect you.
Yes.
Probably.
But even at that time, in my own mind, I'm thinking, yeah, but I bet she doesn't understand what I'm going through. Like, yeah, there's other parents that are raising hard kids. I'm not, parenting's hard, and yeah, I'm sure, yeah, but trust me, nobody's understanding what I'm going through. Long story short, end up meeting Beth, connect right away. It's like that sisterhood of, oh my gosh, I'm not alone. And it's almost like you hold on for a lifeline.
Yes.
Then in a social media group, Kathleen and I ended up hooking up, and she reached out and said, I think we live in the same community. I'm going
3 of you,
away.
this rare thing that nobody ever sees, and 3 of you live within about how far from each other?
5 miles.
Well,
we're about
she's in the middle.
She's in
So
between.
we're
10 miles in
10
between.
miles.
10 miles. There's
Same
3 of
city.
you.
Yes.
Same
And
city.
this city is not a big,
No,
It's not a big
not a
city.
metropolitan.
no, this is kind of
Ironically,
eastern Denver, out in the middle of nowhere, and there's 3 of
small
you.
town.
Ironically, though, there's several more.
There's
Well,
you draw
not
a 10
several.
mile radius around where I
Yes.
live in between them, and there's probably at least 10 more.
Yes.
that we've
That we
learned
know of.
about.
Yes.
Yeah.
That we're aware of.
Right.
That
So-
either do or have lived in that circle.
Yeah.
Some have moved, but
And we met for coffee, and I remember the evening very clear. I was reading on one of the social media groups, and I was reading a story that another parent had posted, and I could feel her desperation, and I could feel the crisis in the house, and I could hear what she was saying. And at that point, I was kind of on the end of my journey with it, with locating placement and stuff for my daughter so she could be safe. And I just felt ethically, I cannot do anything. I cannot sit here and do nothing. I felt like it was driving by a massive car wreck where people are
Gawking.
yeah, and I thought, you have to get out and help. Like, you can't just let people be in this crisis alone. And I just thought, okay, I'm gonna just see what happens with this. And I think it was the next day, I was on the phone with Kathleen, and I'm like, I can't do this. And we know somebody, we have a contact in the media, and I don't know, they may want to do the story, but here's what I'm thinking. I think we have to do something. Are you on board? And she was like, I agree. I feel the same way. And I'm going, okay, we've got to call back. We've got to create an army, and we've got to help be a lifeline for these families, for these children. Adoptions are failing.
Yeah.
That's not okay. Every child does deserve a family. But we have to be smart in meeting those child's needs.
And
what
holding the family together
Right.
in the
keep-
process.
right,
Yeah.
and keeping everybody safe.
right.
And there's ways to do that.
And I want to touch on something too. So I got some training as a crisis responder, and what I learned there really impacted me, because this whole PTSD thing in moms, I get it some when there are kids who try to kill their parents.
Yes.
I get that. That didn't happen with me. Okay, my life was not threatened. My physical being was not being threatened. And we understand PTSD in that instance, but I'm like, why do I have it? And what they said was, you can get PTSD from 2 different threats. One is your physical life, and one is your psychological life. And I remember just feeling like there is an edge, and I am teetering right here. And if I go off, because we're already
Compromise.
That's a nice word, compromised, medicated, this close to a padded room, we're already right there. I'm sitting on the edge, and I'm thinking, if I go off, what happens? Can you come back? What happens?
And I think part of that PTSD comes from the professionals not understanding, because we're already feeling compromised and scared.
I like that word.
and lonely.
Yeah.
But then when you are reaching out for help, and all the professionals you go to don't have an understanding,
And they're mocking you.
Well,
Yes.
right.
And
I think-
minimizing your
or
pain.
actually turning
blaming
against
you.
you.
Right.
That's a
I
terrifying
think
place
that
to be.
sends that PTSD
Yes.
That's
even more
as
so.
much trauma as what we're living at home.
Yeah.
And they're layering our trauma, and they're layering our PTSD as professionals by turning it back on us and questioning. And I get from that point of view that you have to do some seeking on that. But when you already have a list full of diagnoses from professionals that have diagnosed as best as they can, and you're describing situations that are as exuberant, I don't even know what word I'm looking for, as big as we're describing, with the ongoing issues.
Because we're
Then we
talking
should
about chronic
be looked at.
trauma in a
Absolutely.
home. We're talking, some people go through a crisis, and it lasts a week or a month or whatever.
Yeah.
We're talking about ongoing crises
minute by
with
minute.
trauma where people, I remember calling my mom at 9 in the morning and saying, I'm not sure I can make it to noon.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we're not talking about,
Right.
we'll just get through this little bout, because lots of people have bouts with something.
Yes.
We're talking about like the entirety of raising your child, and then even maybe after 18, because many of these kids are not going to be independent.
Right.
And so what do you do when there's chronic trauma for years? What do you do with that? And I remember speaking at a conference for counselors, and as I was talking, there was a social worker in the back of the room who literally started weeping because she didn't know. And so we're not blaming the professionals.
No. We need the professionals.
We need them,
Yeah.
but we need them to get educated because they are contributing to the problem in ignorance and thinking that they know. Because here's how we present. If there are any clinicians watching, we will come in, and first of all, the first counselor I went to, I was going for a totally different issue, and it was like 6 months before this child even came up because I already knew. Don't even. And she's like, wait a minute, what's happening in your family? And then she started addressing. But what we look like when we show up is we are angry, we are depressed, our child is charming, our husband's probably checked out. There's all this triangulation going on, but mom looks like a basket case.
Yeah.
And so they immediately start looking at us like this is a parenting issue.
Absolutely.
And that's what's happening. So you guys got together and you developed this plan to, we can't just sit by, we have to do something. So you developed RAD Advocates. Can you tell us a little bit about RAD Advocates? Can you give this into this? Yeah, give a little bit.
So what our organization does is we advocate for families who are in crisis, and not even in crisis. It's wonderful when we do get the calls of, I just found out my child has this diagnosis and what do you recommend? But typically the calls we get are families in crisis. And we get on the phone with them and we help to educate a little bit more on the disorder, and we help to develop a safety plan. And then from there we also, we regulate where they are, first of all, and what does safety need to look like for that family, and then develop a safety plan. And we just kind of guide them through all of the challenges this disorder has of wherever that individual family is on this journey. Because it could be, we all experience a lot of the same things, but where the family is at on that journey can look very different. And
Yes,
so
because
we want to meet them
we
right
all
where
have
they're
different
at.
resources. Some people have the energy to, okay, I'm gonna go, and other people are like, I am so past done. I've been done for 3 years and I don't even know. Yeah, so you're dealing with people at all the different levels of this.
Right.
And we meet them where they are with what they are wanting, and then we help educate and guide them to what that could look like. Sometimes they change their mind on what they want because they didn't know what else was out there.
Right.
But whether we agree with them or not, we support them where they are.
It's meeting them right where they are.
And validating them.
Yeah, and through that, we are now also able to educate professionals. So whether we're on a call with social services with a family that has, maybe a case open or something there, then we're able to educate the social workers that are on the call.
And you're all regulated, so they're not just listening to the mom when they sound crazy.
Right.
And she is not
No,
crazy.
she's not. But
No,
she's
no.
grasping at straws, and she's fed up, and she's tired.
And feels very defensive
Yeah,
because
very
people
defensive.
aren't listening to
Yeah.
her
Attacked
needs
and
and to
blamed.
really understanding what this disorder looks like in the home. Yeah, so whether it's residential treatment centers, child protective services,
Medicaid.
individual therapists,
Mm-hmm.
insurance providers,
Right.
Medicaid, we're able to be a part of these treatment team meetings, family planning meetings, and to help create a strategy from our understanding and our knowledge of the disorder to help the professionals involved also create a
And
plan.
I think that that's key what Amy just said, and this is a focus that we have, as you know, and anyone who has a child with RAD understands, the family has an understanding and insight that no one outside of the family unit can have,
Yes.
because the disorder is somewhat of a chameleon. So when you have a professional come into your home, let's say for in-home therapy, or you're going into a facility, or you're seeing an outpatient therapist, the behaviors of the child are going to look different. And so what we have worked really hard, and in some cases we've been successful, and some other cases still are very resistant to this idea, but children with this disorder really need security. And so they need a team of people to all be working together, and that family, those parents, are the cornerstone of that team. And so you are really crippling the effectiveness of a team for that child when you marginalize the family and the parents. And so that's the piece that we're working really hard on, is you need to include those parents as
and
a
listen
critical piece
to them.
Yes, the critical piece of the team.
And trust them, even if
Yes.
they're saying you're not seeing it.
Right, because you very likely will not see it. Because that child will not show that to you.
And attachment disorder is an intimacy disorder. And so therapists outside the family are not intimate.
Right.
And they're not going to see it. It only gets triggered by the intimate people in that relationship.
Right.
And that's why they don't see it.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You know, you guys are doing everything that I needed that wasn't there. And I'm sure you're doing everything that you needed that wasn't there.
And that's why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Because we needed it too, and we didn't have it.
Yes. And so we've all kind of come together, and because what I do is coach families typically, and we refer a lot back and forth, because you guys kind of got them through the process and helped them with the professionals. And what I do is help them with their own grief and their own trauma.
Right.
The parents, not the children.
Right.
And not that the children aren't important, they are. We need to find the help for the children. That triggers me. I can't do it. So I know my limits, and
Parents need help too.
Yes, so I work with the families, the parents, and sometimes even we're starting to work more with teens, the siblings of these kids, because they're overlooked very much. But we've all come together, and you guys have created something amazing that I have joined in on, and I want you guys to share about this, and because this is the whole reason we're doing this podcast. So who wants to make the announcement?
So we have decided to do a conference, Navigating RAD for caregivers. Essentially, I mean, what we decided is we are getting calls all the time, and we are really just bursting at our seams of needing to help families and the calls that we're getting, and we recognize how we do that and what that looks like, and we are figuring out how to coordinate with other professionals to take what we do within our advocacy and our education and guiding families through this disorder and taking it to the next level of a conference, so we can reach out to as many caregivers as possible instead of being tapped at only 5 a day. How can we get this out?
Well, and what I love about this too is I speak at a few adoption conferences every year, and I always feel like I'm kind of this lone voice kind of over here in the back of the building that nobody really, they'll find me if they have to, but nobody wants to come to this because RAD is not talked about a lot.
No, it's not.
And, it's so rare and all of that. Yet there's all these people, even at the adoption conferences, feeling like you're meeting a lot of my needs. But if I do have a child with RAD, there's one session I can go to, or maybe two at this whole conference that are going to touch on my issues. And so we're like, you know what? We need a conference just for this.
Right. Because there's a clear difference between attachment issues and attachment disorder. So really, and we, the three of us, had a similar experience of the conference where we went and we were really excited to go learn more about attachment, and
And this wasn't an adoption conference.
This is not
was
an
an
attachment conference. Talking about attachment in children and what does therapy need to look like and different presenters. And so we were really excited also as advocates to go and walk away with more resources and just to feel more educated. And Kathleen wasn't able to even
the keynote speaker, about an hour in, and we were in a room, seriously 600 people, professionals, parents,
I would say,
and I thought, oh my gosh, this is why we're in trouble, because all the heads are nodding like this is great information, and I'm thinking, oh wow, you're not talking about my child, and you all have no idea. And I thought at that moment was transported to the most remote island in the world, and so so I think this conference for us is let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's pull you in and help you, instead of just these, great little conversations, oh, that's a great idea. We want to equip every person who comes to the conference with a tangible, written, personalized plan of action for them and their family.
Yes, and we are giving options that lots of places would never even speak of.
Right.
Yes.
Because we are not in the typical box.
Correct.
And all the things that might work for other adoptive families. And by the way, I have another adopted child, and those things have worked.
Correct.
So way to go,
Yes.
But when you're the one who it doesn't work for, where do you go? And so this is the conference for you.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the uphill battle that families in these situations are facing is that societally we still cling very firmly to the fairy tale ending. And when it's not turning out like that, it's very uncomfortable for people, and they look at it as a failure. And so that's what parents are putting on. I'm a failure, I have failed. And so for families who are raising kids with RAD, sometimes very often the success doesn't look like a typical success story. And so we want to help them feel normalized, that your success is a success story.
Yes, because we're dealing with kids with brain injuries.
Yes. Correct.
And when we forget that and think this is just a neurotypical child, let's use autism for a second. Parents that have kids with autism, they kind of have to readjust. It does not mean they can't have a wonderful life, but we have to look at this and go, okay, my child may not be able to go to a college or a 4-year university, and my child may not be able to develop in some of the same ways as other kids, and this is what we're talking about. So it does not mean that we're not successfully parenting if we have to choose some things that are out of the box.
Right. Well, and also helping parents to navigate the systems, the different entities out there, and how do you get through that without looking like the crazy parent. Because the reality is when we can start presenting ourselves differently and advocating for ourselves and educating the others, then maybe in time there will be a change in the way people are seeing.
And that's part of what I do too, is help the families overcome their own trauma. Because when we are responding from a triggered, traumatized place, we look crazy. I have PTSD and I am pretty much recovered. I'm pretty much healed. I don't know how many of you do. I do, but I'm not going to speak for anybody else, but I don't think any of us look crazy. But if we were feeling triggered and pushed up against a wall, and our triggers were being poked at, we can go there. And so I need to teach my clients how to not speak up in times like that. How to get yourself calm, how to get regulated. And isn't it interesting, because our kids have such issues with regulation, and then when that comes into our home, we have trouble
That is
Right.
hard to get
with
through.
regulation
Yeah.
sometimes. So anyway, we want to invite you all
Yes.
to come to this conference. Who wants to talk about where and when?
So it's September. It's in September here in Colorado, the beautiful Rocky Mountains, September 11th and 12th. And we're going to have some wonderful speakers. Carrie O'Toole will be one of them, and Forrest Lean. We just have a lot going on, and we are really excited to hopefully meet face to face to some of the families that we've worked with.
We're very excited about
And to meet plenty more that we haven't worked with, and we just want to start spreading the word that that you're not in this alone.
Yeah.
And there is a way. There is a way to survive this.
We are all doing
We
it.
are all
Right.
doing
And
it.
so if we can provide hope
Right.
Yes.
for all of you, because that was what you said, you know, I
Yep.
can handle hard, I can't handle hopeless.
Right.
So our hope for all of you is that you will feel our hope coming back, because we're all doing well in life.
Yes.
And it's possible.
Yes,
So
it's
we want to guide you along, just, you know, you're a few steps behind, and step in our footsteps
Yep.
and
Yeah.
follow along.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So thank you all so much for joining us, and keep your eye out. Share this podcast with anybody that you know who's struggling, and we'll see you back here next time on Broken and Brilliant.